Welcome to Decode Station. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Dr. Marcus, and this is quite the file we're opening today.
It really is. Today, we're not just looking at a cold case. We're looking at the cold case. It's a file that has, puzzled investigators, scientists, everyone for over 60 years. It starts like this classic adventure story, young, experienced hikers in the Soviet Union. But it ends in a scene that feels more like something out of a horror film.
We are going to the Ural Mountains. The year is 1959. And the location, it's a slope the local Mansi people call Dead Mountain.
Right. And what's so gripping about this deep dive, what really pulls you in, isn't just the horror.
No, it's the people involved. Usually in these wilderness disasters, you can point to a mistake. Poor planning, bad gear, inexperience.
But not here.
Not at all. This case is a total paradox because the victims did everything right.
Yeah.
And they still died in ways that, well, they just defy any simple explanation.
That's the hook. We're talking about the Dyatlov group. 9 hikers led by Igor Dyatlov. And these are not amateurs.
Oh, no. They were aiming for grade the 3rd certification. For you listening, that was the highest difficulty rating for a hike in the Soviet Union at the time. You had to be an elite athlete and a survivalist.
They knew the snow. They knew the risks. They were prepared.
Which brings us to the core contradiction, the thing that just doesn't compute. You have 9 survival experts who, in the middle of a freezing night, flee their only shelter. They run out into the dark towards certain death.
It's the definition of irrational. So that's our mission today. We're going to sift through the evidence, the autopsy reports, the forensic data, and try to find some logic in what looks like absolute madness.
We have to answer the question, what forces a survivalist to choose death in the cold over safety in a tent?
So let's set the scene. It's late January 1959. The group makes their way into the northern Urals. By February 1st, they're setting up camp on the slope of Kholat-Syakhl Dead Mountain.
Desolate, windy, but nothing they couldn't handle. They set up the tent, eat dinner, get ready for sleep, and then just silence.
Weeks go by. No one hears from them. Search parties are sent out. And then on February 26th, rescuers finally spot the tent.
And the condition of that tent is our first major clue. This is where the story shifts from, a missing persons case to something much darker.
The tent was half collapsed, covered in snow. But when they cleared it,
they found something very specific. The canvas wasn't ripped open by the wind or an animal. It had been slashed.
And not randomly, right? This wasn't a bear trying to get in.
No, the forensic analysis was definitive. The cuts were made from the inside.
Let's just pause on that. It's minus 30 degrees Celsius outside. Your tent is your lifeline.
It's everything.
And some overwhelming terror makes you take a knife and destroy it just to get out a few seconds faster. What could do that?
That is the million-dollar question. It implies a panic that just overrode every single survival instinct they had.
You don't cut your way out of a tent unless the inside has become more dangerous than the storm outside.
You're trading a known safety for a lethal environment. The tent has become a trap.
And the scene outside just confirms this total breakdown of everything they knew. The footprints. They tell a chaotic story.
Well, undress is probably a better word for it. The sources confirm the group ran out mostly in socks. Some were barefoot.
In just their underwear.
Many in just their underwear or light sleepwear. No coats, no boots.
In minus 30? I mean, I can't even wrap my head around that. At that temperature, frostbite is immediate. To run into that darkness without your boots, you have to be running from something worse than freezing to death.
And here's where it gets even stranger. You'd expect a stampede, right? Sprinting, scattering. But the footprint analysis, it suggests they were walking.
Wait, walking? You're panicked enough to slash your tent, but you calmly walk down the hill? That makes even less sense.
It adds a layer of confusion, doesn't it? It suggests whatever made them leave, they initially stayed together. They moved down the slope about 1.5 kilometers toward the tree line.
And that's where the tragedy gets so much darker. The recovery of the bodies.
And the autopsy reports.
This is the part of the file that it's tough to read. Because until now, you have a tragedy. But the medical reports, this is a horror movie.
It is a gruesome mosaic. The first 2 bodies were found by a cedar tree. They were in their underwear next to the remains of a small fire, cause of death for them, and for 3 others found between the tree and the tent.
Hypothermia.
Hypothermia. Tragic, but it makes medical sense given the conditions.
Right. They froze. Heartbreaking, but logical.
Exactly. If the case ended there, we'd call it a bizarre incident, maybe paradoxical undressing from the cold. But it didn't end there. 2 months later, the last 4 hikers were found.
Buried under meters of snow in a ravine. And their autopsies told a completely different story.
We are not talking about freezing anymore. We're talking about severe, brutal physical trauma.
What kind of trauma?
One had a major skull fracture. 2 others had massive chest fractures. We're talking multiple ribs broken on both sides.
But, and this is the detail that keeps coming up, there was no external bruising. How is that possible? How do you shatter someone's ribs without leaving a single mark on their skin?
It's a medical anomaly. The doctor who performed the autopsies, he compared the force to being hit by a high-speed car.
A car crash.
But with no scrapes, no cuts, no soft tissue wounds you'd get from a fight or a fall. It was as if this immense pressure came from everywhere at once, crushing them without cutting them.
Like a compressive force.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And the horror didn't stop there. The bodies in the ravine had other disturbing injuries.
Disturbing that's a mild way of putting it. I had to reread the report. The bodies weren't whole.
We have to be specific. One of the hikers, Ludmila Dubinina, was found missing her tongue.
Gone. And both she and another hiker were missing their eyes. I think for anyone listening, that's the detail that just, it sticks with you. Missing your mind goes to very dark places.
And from a purely forensic standpoint, you have to look at decomposition. They were in a wet ravine for months. Scavenging animals, water effects, soft tissues like the tongue and eyes are often the first to go.
I know, I get the science, microorganisms in water. But you combine that with the smashed ribs and the slashed tent, it just adds to this atmosphere of pure terror. And right when you think it can't get any weirder, the file throws in a detail from science fiction.
You're referring to the lab results on the clothing.
Yeah, I am. Apparently, freezing and being crushed wasn't enough. They found radiation.
Beta radiation, to be precise. It was found on some of the clothing, not all, but enough to raise a serious red flag.
But why? Why would hikers be radioactive?
Well, you have to remember the context. This is the Soviet Union, 1959, Cold War, nuclear testing, secret military bases. That was the world they lived in. It leads you to ask, did they just walk into something they weren't supposed to see?
And that ties into the other anomaly, the glowing orange spheres.
Exactly. Other people in the area, totally unconnected to the hikers, reported seeing strange lights in the sky around the time of the incident.
Glowing spheres, radiation, internal injuries. It's too many puzzle pieces that don't seem to fit the same puzzle. So let's try to make sense of this. Let's get into the theories.
Okay, we could basically split them into 2 camps. The natural theories, so man versus nature, and the conspiratorial man versus the state. Let's start with the science.
All right. How do you explain car crash injuries without a car?
The leading scientific theory today involves what's called a slab avalanche.
Now, I've heard critics say the slope wasn't steep enough for an avalanche.
And for decades, that was the argument against it. But newer models show it's possible. See, instead of loose snow tumbling down, a slab avalanche is when a whole, solid plate of snow breaks loose and slides down as one unit.
Like a block of concrete. And they had cut into the snow to pitch their tent.
Correct. They disturbed the snowpack. The theory is that later that night, a delayed fracture occurred. A small but incredibly heavy slab of snow slid right on top of them.
Oh, I see. So it's not a huge wave of snow. It's a heavy block pinning them down.
Exactly. And that explains the injuries perfectly. That crushing pressure is enough to break ribs and skulls. But because they were inside the tent under blankets, the fabric cushioned the blow. No cuts, no bruises, just broken bones.
That makes a terrifying amount of sense for the injuries. So the slab hits, they panic, the entrance is blocked, they slash their way out.
Right. They're injured, in shock, they drag their friends out, they fear another avalanche.
Yeah.
So they move toward the trees, walking, not running.
Then the cold just finishes the job. It's tragic, but it's logical. It fits. But does it fit the madness, the shoes? I still can't get past that. Even terrified, you'd grab your boots.
And that's where the theory gets fuzzy. And of course, an avalanche doesn't explain the radiation.
Or the orange spheres.
Exactly. Which brings us to a second natural theory. This one is about sound. Infrasound.
This is the one I find the most unsettling.
It is, but it's based on real science.
Yeah.
It's a phenomenon called Kármán vortex streets. When high winds hit a specific shape, like the dome of that mountain, it can create a series of mini vortices.
And these make a sound.
A sound you can't hear, but your body can feel. It's below 20 hertz. Infrasound.
And what does that do to a person?
Studies show it can cause nausea, anxiety, and just this intense irrational dread. It can vibrate the fluid in your eyes, causing hallucinations. It triggers a primal fight or flight response with no visible cause.
So they're in the tent, the wind is howling, and suddenly they're overwhelmed by this feeling that they are about to die. They don't know why, but every cell is screaming, "Get out!"
Precisely. The mountain itself could have been generating a frequency that drove them into a panic state. They slashed the tent to escape the feeling. By the time the wind shifts, they're a mile away, barefoot, and it's too late.
Horrifying. Driven mad by the wind. It explains the irrationality, but again, the radiation. The broken bones. Infrasound doesn't do that.
No. And that's why the natural theories, while compelling, don't satisfy everyone. They explain parts of the puzzle, but not the whole thing. Which brings us to the cover-up.
The military theory. That they saw a secret Soviet weapons test.
This theory leans heavily on the radiation and the glowing spheres. We know the Soviets were testing things like parachute mines in remote areas during this time.
Parachute mines.
An explosive that detonates in the air. The theory is the hikers witnessed a test. The glowing spheres could have been the ordnance itself.
And the injuries could be from a blast wave.
A concussion wave, yes. A nearby aerial explosion could cause that severe internal trauma, the car crash impact, without direct contact. It crushes your insides, but leaves the skin intact. The radiation would be the fallout.
And the fact that the case was closed so quickly, the files classified, that suggests the state wanted it buried.
It does. In this scenario, they weren't running from the snow, they were running from explosions. It changes the narrative completely. They become collateral damage.
So we're left with this friction. The natural theories explain the snow and the psychology. The military theory explains the radiation and the lights.
It's like having pieces from two different puzzles. You can almost make a picture with half of them, but there are always leftovers.
So how do we synthesize this? Could it be both?
It's possible. A cascade of events. Perhaps a military test triggered an avalanche?
A blast from a weapon causes the snow slab to shift.
It connects the dots. The blast explains the spheres, the panic, the radiation. The avalanche explains the specific injuries. It creates a cohesive narrative, but there's no smoking gun. No declassified document that says we were testing a bomb there on that night.
So why are we still so obsessed with this story? I think it's because it hits on this primal fear. You do everything right, you prepare, you're an expert, and it doesn't matter.
It's the total loss of control. Whether it was the snow, the wind, or the military, these people were reduced to nothing by forces they couldn't fight, couldn't even understand.
It's the sheer desolation of it. That moment of running barefoot into the pitch black, knowing you can't go back, that choice. It's haunting.
It's a reminder that there are still places in the world and in history that they refuse to give up their secrets.
Right.
We can apply all the science and logic we want, but the mountain remains silent.
It certainly does, and maybe that's the scariest part. That 60 years later, we still don't know for sure what made them run.
We're left with probabilities, not certainties.
I want to leave you with one final thought. The infrasound theory. The idea that the wind itself drove them mad. If that's true, they weren't killed by a monster or a secret weapon. They were killed by the sound of the wind. So what's scarier? To think the government killed them to keep a secret? Or to think that the earth itself can scream at a pitch that makes us destroy ourselves?
That is a disturbing thought to end on.
Thank you for listening. Stay curious, stay skeptical. See you in the next file. Goodbye.